So without further ado, I'm going to introduce someone who in this place certainly doesn't need any introduction, Rabbi Billet, Maradasra of Young Israel of Woodmere. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Judy. And I want to say that the OU adding Judy to their staff is a major upgrade in the services that they'll be able to provide. I know my wife's aunt, my aunt's here. Okay, look at this. Marilyn, if you can't hear with the microphone, I don't know what to tell you. So Judy Yashikoach, I don't know if she's here. I started saying Judy's addition to the OU staff is a major upgrade. I see this STAJE as a program for young people and for younger people, and I assume it's called STAJE because everyone who's here is wise and experienced and gets it, knows what it's all about. That was a song that we heard when we were young, right? What's it all about? The Alfie, right? Okay. So I wasn't really sure. Oh, David, am I supposed to press this? Was David Gross? The red button?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. David, I don't know if it's working or not. Maybe you should do this. He's a member of the shul. He asked me to press a button. If it doesn't work, I'll lose my job.
You can start, Rabbi.
I can start?
Here you go.
Okay. I started saying I didn't really know I didn't understand the topic that I was asked to talk about. So I'm going to guess that I picked something that is relevant to the topic, and that is interaction within the family in the context of Jewish traditional sources and halacha. And I chose to do it on two levels. You have a sheet in front of you about certain halachic types of situations, but I'm not going to start with that. I want to talk about the Jewish family in the context of the Bible, because there's much to observe in the Bible, and it's not necessarily only the Jewish family. I think the Bible is well aware that even though we might say blood is thicker than water, it doesn't mean that there aren't issues that arise within the family from the earliest moments in time. Now, some of these things are really quite upsetting, and in a normative family, they don't happen, at least a normative family in the context of our type of community. So when you talk about a story like Cain and Hevel, clearly there were issues in the family. There were issues over recognition, over power, over control, over possibly birthright, which is oftentimes an issue that you find in the family, in the Bible. And what happened was, of course, that Cain killed Hevel. Now, I tend to be a little bit sympathetic to Cain. Cain, the biblical punishment for murder is death. And yet, Cain was not punished with death. Cain was punished with a kind of exile. And I like to understand that because Cain really didn't know that he was going to kill his brother. How would Cain know that he was going to kill his brother? He was angry at his brother, and he started hitting his brother. But no one had ever died before in this world. And how are you supposed to know that if you hit somebody, you beat somebody, you're angry at someone, your adrenaline is flowing, you've lost your temper. So you're doing what your instinct tells you to do. I want to beat him up. But you don't know what it means to beat somebody up. And then he killed his brother. So I like to think that Cain is not a premeditated murderer. He wouldn't be guilty of capital punishment. He would have to go, in a biblical sense, into a city, an Ir Miklat, an exile city, like anyone who kills another person carelessly, but not with forethought or malice. Then, after the generation of Cain, you have more stuff. You have stuff in Noach's own family. There's an incident which occurs. Again, we don't know exactly what the point of the incident was, but it was Noach gets drunk, and his sons, Shem, Cham, and Yefet, are involved in some incident. Cham and his son, Canaan, do something to Noach. What he did to Noach is not very nice, at least according to the way the Talmud interprets it, but let's take it literally in terms of the verse. He was not respectful of Noach's privacy and of Noach's dignity, And Noah was laying naked in a drunken stupor, and he was exposed by his grandson, and two sons come in and they stand up for their father. But already here you have discord in the family, and you already have a grandchild involved in discord with a grandparent, and brothers of the father of that child taking a stand to protect the dignity of their father. In the house of Abraham, we have two sons, but here the rivalry is only something that can occur in a biblical type of situation. It's not practical to our situation today. Here you have a man who has two wives. There's a firstborn son from each wife. Of course, there's only one father. And so while there might not be competition for the love of the mother, there is competition for the recognition of the father, and that exists between Yitzchak and Yishmael. And it also exists between Sarah and Hagar. Again, not something that's realistic in our context, because we Ashkenazim, ever since the time of Rabbeinu Gershom, about 1,000 years ago, we only have a monogamous marriage, so there can't be ever competition in the family between two wives. But in those times, there could be. Monogamy means one husband and one wife. Polygamy means one husband and many wives. Polygamy never went the other way. I didn't write the Bible. But there you have, and those people who've studied Daf Yomi or studied Maseches Yevamos know that the rival wife is called the tzara, right? The tzara, you know, it makes the point for itself, but it's not the tzara for the husband; it's the tzara for each other. They are competing. Right, so you have that situation. That situation occurs again in the Bible. Later on, the story of Rachel and Leah, and competing for the affection of Yaakov. And there's where the husband took a position, apparently, where Yaakov clearly prefers Rachel to Leah. But the problem in the family is that only Leah conceives children for Yaakov. And that creates a problem between two sisters. And there's also an expression, a rather sharp expression, where one sister says to the other, "You've already stolen my husband. Do you want to now get of the dudaim, of the plants that my son Reuven has harvested?" The story also manifests itself in one other very, very sharp exchange, and that's between Hannah and Penina later on, for the affection of Elkanah. The Elkanah is Penina's husband and is Hannah's husband. Hannah, again, I guess, is the Sarah in the family. Penina is the Leah in the family. Penina has 10 children. Hannah has no children. And there is, again, a lot of tension in the family because of the circumstances. And then there's the old sibling rivalry outside of, and the sibling rivalry in the most realistic sense first occurs in the Yaakov and Esav story, because Yaakov and Esav are children of the Yitzchak, of all the patriarchs, was the only monogamous patriarch. Yitzchak had only one wife all of his life, Rivka. And they had two sons, and the two sons were very different. And here, I like to think, the Ramban says that the source of the problems in the family, of course, was the rivalry between the two boys, who were very different in appearance, very different in character, very different in inclination. But I think that here is the first opportunity where the subject of parenting becomes realistic. The Ramban says that Yitzchak and Rivka didn't speak enough to each other about their sons. Now, one would expect in the house of patriarchs, right, people like Yitzchak and matriarchs, Yitzchak and Rivka, to deal with this better, in a better way. So on the one hand, one might say that Rivka saw things that Yitzchak didn't, and maybe because Yitzchak suffered from some form of blindness, and she knew exactly what the score was with their son Esav. And therefore, she chose to do certain things. But on the other hand, one might say that Yitzchak was a lot wiser than we give him credit for. In other words, where is the big test encounter between Yaakov and Esav. The big test encounter is when Yitzchak wants to give the blessing, as he's getting on in years, and we're told that he doesn't see so well, and he calls in his son Esav, and he says to Esav, go out to the field and hunt me a hunt, and bring me back some food like I like to eat it, and then I will be able to give you a blessing. And Rivka overhears this, and she doesn't like what she hears because she knows that Yaakov is the more pious of the two and the more representative of what the family stood for. And so she calls Yaakov aside and she says, listen, this is what happened. I want you to go quickly bring me from the family stock some animals. You'll slaughter them, and I'll prepare them the way that your father likes them. And don't worry about being discovered because you'll put on Esav's smelly, field clothing that he uses as a hunter. And your father doesn't see that well anyway, and you'll convince your father that you're Esav and you'll get the blessings. Now, as much as we might say that Rivka was the wise person because she saw things more clearly than Esav saw them, there's another perspective to say that Yitzchak was really wise. What did Yitzchak ask Esav to do? Yitzchak asked Esav to go to the field and hunt. What was Esav? He was a hunter. And what Yitzchak was saying is, look, Esav, your profession is not the profession that I would have wanted you to have chosen for yourself. I really wasn't looking forward to having a son who was a hunter. The only other hunter in the Bible is not a very admirable person. His name was Nimrod. I wasn't looking to have somebody who models himself after Nimrod. But since you've done that, let me give you an opportunity to use your profession, your career, to do something which will enable you to do a mitzvah, which will enable you to do something good. In effect, he said, listen, if you're going to be a hunter, then open up Tomchei Shabbos. Give food to the hungry. Do things with your profession that are good. Help out your father. I'm giving you a mitzvah to do. And he was going to give him a blessing. But if you pay careful attention to the Bible, how many times did Yitzchak give blessings? So what was the first time he gave a blessing? The first time he gave a blessing, he gave the blessing to Yaakov, who was disguised as Esav. And what was the blessing that he gave him? Does anyone remember? And God shall give you from the dews of the heaven, right? V'yitein lecha Elokeim mitala shamayim, u'mishmanei aretz, from the fat of the land, v'rov dagan v'tirosh, and much wheat and much wine. Yavducha amim, yishtachavu lecha, lumim, yehei gevir le'achecha, yadcha ba'oref oivecha. You should be powerful and successful, and you will rule. Your brother will look up to you. But basically, what kind of blessing did he give him? He gave him a blessing of financial success and security in the world. What was the second blessing that Isaac gave out? Anyone remember? Esav comes in from the field, and he says, I'm here, Daddy. And suddenly Yitzchak begins to tremble, and they said, what's going on? And Yitzchak says, I think I made a big mistake. Your brother came, he took your blessing. Esav said, you have nothing left for me? And so Yitzchak gives a blessing to Esav. And basically it's the same thing. He essentially says the same thing, except that you won't be more powerful than your brother. He gives him a blessing of prosperity, of success, of being able to live comfortably in the world. What's the third blessing that Isaac gives out, Yitzchak gives out? Who does he give it to? He gives it to Yaakov. Remember, Esav wants to kill Yaakov. Rivka comes to Yitzchak and she says, send Yaakov away. I don't like the wives that Esav chose from the women of the land. Send him to my brother. He'll marry a woman from our family, and that'll be much better. But Rivka is really trying to save Yaakov's life because Esav wants to kill him. And so Yitzchak calls in Yaakov, and he says, I want you to go to your mother's brother, go to where she lives, find a wife there, and God should bless you. And God should give you the blessing of Abraham to inherit the land of Israel. What was the most important blessing for the patriarchs? Clearly, it's the blessing of Abraham. And so what was Yitzchak planning to do with the blessing of Abraham? All along he was planning to give the blessing of Abraham to Yaakov. And so, instead of looking at Yitzchak the way some people look at Yitzchak, he has this blind guy, he doesn't know what's going on in the world. Rivka is the one who sees it so clearly. Maybe one should say, maybe Yitzchak saw it pretty clearly. He understood that Esav is a problem from his perspective. He would have wanted Esav to be a Talmud Chacham. He would have wanted Esav to be a doctor. He would have wanted him to be a professional of some sort. He would have wanted him to be a successful businessman, whatever it would be, a Baal Tzedakah. But Esav chose to be a baseball player. Esav chose to be a hunter. He chose to do what he wanted. Let me direct my son and let me enable him to be something even in this chosen profession. If he's going to be a sanitation worker, let him be the sanitation commissioner. And let him pick up the chametz in Borough Park on Erev Pesach at a good time. Let him help the Jewish people as the sanitation commissioner. But, in other words, and the Ramban says it, that if you don't have good communication in the family, and Yitzchak and Rivka didn't talk about their children, the net result is either Rivka did the right thing and Yitzchak blew it because she never spoke to him, or Yitzchak was going to do the right thing, right? And he blew it because he never explained to his wife what was on his mind, what was his plan. And so if there are two people, if two parents are functioning as independent people without working together in terms of trying to figure out what's best for their common children, what could happen? And of course, the family of Yaakov, there were 4 wives in the family. There was rivalry between the wives. There were rivalries between the sons, but there weren't only rivalries between the sons of the different mothers. There was a rivalry between Reuven and Yehuda. Levi was living in his own world together with Shimon. There were a lot of issues in the family. And I think part of the reason why the Torah shares all this information with us is because we're supposed to learn not only from the strengths of our forebears, but we're also supposed to learn from their mistakes. It's there to show us that in raising children, there's no one formula. But what is important in raising children is communication between the parents with each other, communication between the parents with the children, and trying to keep the peace, trying to keep the family together in a certain kind of way. Those are very, very important things. And the stories in the Bible in terms of family difficulty happens in the best of families. In the house of David, just for example, there was a brother and a sister, half brother, half sister, Amnon and Tamar. The half brother rapes the half sister. The full brother of that sister kills the half brother who raped the half sister. It's the family of David, King David, David Melech Yisrael, David Mashiach ben David. But look, there are in the Bible, the rivalries are between parents and their children, children and their parents, siblings with each other. It comes up over and over again. How does Shlomo HaMelech become king? King Solomon. David is going to die. Who wants to become king? Adoniah ben Chagit. Who is Chagit? A wife of David. Yeah, but David had promised another wife, Bathsheba, that her son, Shlomo, would become king. And so again, there's another rivalry. It's happening. There are 3 brothers. David has 3 nephews, Yoav, Avishai, and Asael. They're independent operators. And again, over and over and over again, the Bible describes situations where in the nuclear body that makes up the Jewish people, which is the family, what's the Jewish people without... The Jewish people is made up of all the families, the collective families of the Jewish people. That's what forms the Jewish people. It's not an easy thing. Of course, the Bible is not a halachic work. I mean, the Bible has laws, but we don't make our halachic judgments based on what's written in the Bible. We make our halachic judgments based on the oral tradition, based on what we got at Mount Sinai. And so I have a page in front of you to take a couple of these examples. I'm not going to take all of these examples, but I'm going to take a couple of these examples and try to show you where there could be issues in the families, even in a modern sense. So I'm going to you see where it says A, in the tractate Bava Metzia. You see that page 1? Top left corner, it says A. All right. So, the Torah Bava Metzia, in this section of Bava Metzia, the subject matter is when you find a lost object, you're supposed to return it. Right? It's called Hashavat Aveda, returning a lost object. So what happens if a Kohen sees a lost object in a cemetery? The Kohen's not supposed to go into a cemetery, right? That's the rule. What happens if his father tells him? But now a Kohen is also obligated, like every other Jew, to honor his father and his mother. So what happens if this Kohen's father tells him, I want you to go into the cemetery and retrieve that lost object and return it? So now this young Kohen is conflicted. On the one hand, his father, he has the mitzvah, the commandment to honor his father. On the other hand, he has a commandment to obey God's law, and God's law says he can't go into the cemetery. So the Gemara raises the question, I guess I'll read this one in English. If it is in a cemetery, he must not defile himself for it. Our rabbis taught, whence do we know that if his father said to him, defile yourself, or do not return it, he must disobey him? Because it is written, you shall fear every man, his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbath. I am the Lord your God. Ye are all bound to honor me. We read a couple of weeks ago, Parshas Kedoshim, right? It says, Ish imo v'aviv tiro v'shaptotai tishmoru. You should be in awe of your parents. Keep my Sabbath. What does keeping your Sabbath have to do with being in awe of your parents? You know, I would say something else. My parents tell me go to shul on Shabbos. I don't want to go to shul, so go to shul on Shabbos. My parents tell me you have to have lechem mishnah for you have to make kiddush. But no, the Gemara says no, what it means is the following. It means that if you should honor your parents, but the limitation is to observe the Sabbath. What happens if your parents tell you not to observe the Sabbath? You can't listen to your parents. You have to obey God's law. Et shaptotai tishmoru, because God, in a certain way, is everyone's father. He's our parents' father, and he's my father. And if God is the father of all fathers, so to speak, excuse me for the masculine use of the term, but God is we call him the Av, right? God is the master, so we have to listen to God. And that already imposes certain types of issues on a lot of different people and a lot of different circumstances. So I want to take, let's turn the page. I'm not going to go in order. But I can tell you situations where I've seen conflict in family and over things like this. I'll take the last item, H, marriage. So now, every family, we raise our children. We raise our children, and we want our children to marry nicely. A boy should marry a nice girl, a girl should marry a nice boy. We hope that our children will have shalom bayis until 120 years, as they say. Should enjoy the company of their spouse. Should be blessed by God with children, grandchildren for us. Should raise their children in a good way, and it should all be wonderful. What happens if my son or my daughter is going out with somebody that I do not approve of? What happens in a situation like that? Now, I'm just citing these as examples where the roles in families become very, very, they become conflicted, and where there are laws about it. So I can tell you, I once had a situation. This is in the pre-Woodmere years, although it flowed over into the Woodmere years. It had nothing to do though with Woodmere per se, where I used to teach in a yeshiva high school, and I had a wonderful, wonderful student in the yeshiva high school who came from a very wonderful family. Both his mother and his father were really outstanding people, wonderful parents, and great Jews and great people. And this boy was a very, very nice boy. It wasn't so easy to raise. He was a very nice boy. So anyway, I came to Woodmere. It had been years since he had been my student in high school. But we maintained contact, and then he was seeing a girl who was a Stern College girl, but she came from a family which was not an Orthodox family. She was what we call in, I guess, a balat teshuva. This boy's family was 7 generations in America, all Shomer Shabbos. And the family prided themselves in that. And so the boy was seeing this girl, and the parents called me, and they said, you know, you have influence over our son. We're not happy with this girl. We have no control over him. You have to do us the favor and break up the shidduch. He can do better. And for our family, we can't have it that the grandchildren of the grandparents rather, of our grandchildren on one side are not Shomer Shabbos. You know, the kid's going to go out there with his parent. So I called up the boy, and I said to him, what's going on? He said, Rabbi, I have one request. I'll do whatever you tell me, but I want you to meet the girl, which I thought was a reasonable request. And so we invited the girl for Shabbos to our home. And I have to tell you, we fell in love with her. We thought she was a lovely, wonderful person, a sincere, devoted Jew, intelligent, and from the perspective of those things these are also important. A spouse has to be attractive to their person who they're marrying. I'm not giving objective criteria for what beauty or handsomeness is, but you know, certainly a well put together girl, and presented herself very, very nicely. And so after Shabbos, the boy said, "What do you think?" I said, "Nice girl. You have to make choices in your life. I can't tell you not to marry this girl." Eventually, the parents found out. It was a whole parsha. It went on for 2 years. These were very, very charitable people. They went to every Rebbe in the book who tried to dissuade it, and it didn't work. And so the boy married the girl. The parents screaming. They said, "Rabbi, what are you doing? You know, there's a law called Kibbut Avayim. We don't want this. How could you tell our son that he could defile it?" I said, "Because the law in the Shulchan Aruch is like him, not like you." And I'll show you. If you look under the letter H, it says Ramah Yoredeya. If you can't see it, I'll read it and translate it anyway. Ramah says like this: V'chein im ha'av moche beben lisa ezo isha sheyachpotz ba haben ein tzarech l'shmo el ha'av. Maharik. Maharik is the Rabbi Yosef Kolin, who was a big rabbi in Italy. The Maharik says that if the father objects to who the son wants to marry, it's also true if the mother objects to who the son wants to marry, and it's also true if the father objects to who the daughter wants to marry, and it's also true if the mother objects to the boy that the daughter wants to marry. You don't have to listen. You know, ultimately, there is a declaration of independence. Children are not owned by their parents. Children are raised by their parents, but they have a right to a life of their own. It's a big mistake a lot of parents make. Now, of course, if we were dealing with a shaila of what we would call nisuei tarovet, intermarriage, that's a different issue. If the girl was going out with Bugsy Siegel, that might be a different issue. But if the parents just don't, this is not who we planned for our son. Our daughter was going to marry a doctor, and now she's going out with a rabbi. You know the difficulty I went through before I was allowed to marry my. So, these are areas where there can be conflict in the family, and conflict not with our young children, but with our older children. And people have to be wise to understand that conflicts like this should be avoided. Sometimes it's the child that really should make the decision. My parents are really right, and even though my hormones tell me that I like this guy or I like this girl, this really is not right. I think parents are allowed to express an opinion, by the way. If they don't like a shidduch, they're allowed to say, "Listen, maybe you can do better." But if the child has a reasonable and logical response, I think parents have to listen. On the other hand, children should try to obey, or take good advice, I should say, not obey, but take good advice from the parents. But again, you have to find that middle ground where the communication skills are good enough, and the objectivity for each party is good enough to be able to make a rational decision. Another area where there sometimes is tension in families is with both older children and younger children. Let me just take the older children's situation. What happens, as we go through the game called life, so you learn as you get older, and your children, let's say, have grown and they're independent and they're managing for themselves. So okay, now it's problem free. My kids are on their own. They have to, but it's not the case. You're a parent for your children until you leave this earth, as long as you have your faculties. I think children also have to understand that they're children to their parents until the very end. What happens if their parents no longer have their faculties? So I wanted to bring you two sources over here. If you look at the top of page 2, it says Kedushin 31b. Rav Asi had an aged mother. This is a story in the Talmud in Maseches Kedushin. Rav Asi was a prominent rabbi, and he lived in Babylonia, and he left Babylonia and he came to Israel. In the period of the Mishnah, it means until around the year 200, Jewish life and Jewish scholarship was centered in Palestine. Okay, and if you know your history, you know that there was a destruction of the temple, the year 70. Jews continued to live in the Jerusalem area. There was the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 120s, 130. You know that the battle carried it all the way down to the area of the Dead Sea, and the Bar Kokhba caves that were found down there. After the Bar Kokhba rebellion was suppressed by the Romans, they forced all the Jews to move up north, and so the Jewish community transferred itself to the Galil and to the Golan Heights. And if you travel in the Galil and the Golan Heights, you find a lot of old Jewish cemeteries. You find the Jewish city of Tzipori, Safaris, where Rabbi Yehuda Nasi lived. The Golan Heights, there are fantastic synagogues that have been found in the Golan Heights. And there was incredible Jewish life up north. That's where the Mishnah was written. And then, after the period of the Mishnah, one of the students of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the redactor of the Mishnah, his name was Rav. Rav moved to Babylonia. Shmuel was already there, and the Talmud Bavli begins to develop, and scholarship begins in Babylonia. Amongst the rabbis who was up in Babylonia and became one of the scholars was a man by the name of Rav Asi. But now look at the story. Rav Asi had an aged mother. She said to him, "I want ornaments." Okay, she wanted jewelry. So he made them for her. "I want a husband." He says, "I will look out for you." That's what he said to her. "I want a husband as handsome as you." She wanted a young husband. Now, Rav Asi, that's what it means. Now, Rav Asi's mother, just for the record, was suffering from dementia. She was suffering from dementia. Now, this sounds cruel, what happens next. Thereupon, he left her and went to Palestine. He couldn't take it. He left her. I don't know if he had any brothers or sisters. I assume he made arrangements for his mother, but he couldn't handle his mother. On hearing that she was following him, he went to Rabbi Yochanan and asked him, "May I leave Palestine for abroad? Do I have to stay here? She's coming after me here in Palestine." "I do not know," said he. Wait a short time. He waited a short time and went before him again. So he waited, and then he asked the question. Rav Asi went back to Rabbi Yochanan and asked the question. "Asi," he said, "you have determined to go. Clearly, you want to get out of here. May the Omnipresent bring you back in peace." Right? Hashem yachzircha b'shalom, right? Then he went before Rabbi Elazar and said to him, perhaps, God forbid, he was angry. So Rav Asi was afraid that Rabbi Yochanan was angry at him and just, was fed up with him. And so he said, okay, God should bless you. But he was dismissing him. So Rabbi Elazar says to him, "What then did he say to you?" Inquired he. Rabbi Elazar asked Ravasi, "What did he say to you? What did Rabbi Yochanan say to you?" He said, "The omnipresent bring you back in peace," was the answer. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said to him. Says Rabbi Elazar to Ravasi, "Had he been angry, he rejoined, he would not have blessed you." He wouldn't have given you a bracha. He would have said, "Okay, do what you want to do." But he wouldn't have said, "May God bless you." So clearly he wasn't angry at you. In the meanwhile, he learned that her coffin was coming. His mother died. "Had I known," he exclaimed, "I would not have gone out. Had I known that my mother had died and was being brought to Israel for burial, I wouldn't have left." Now this is at face value, it's a very, very harsh story. And we might be quick to say, how could a rabbi of the stature of Ravasi, a rabbi of the Talmud, run away from his mother? So I can tell you that Ravasi probably lived at a time where there was not an organized community where there was assistance available for dealing with dementia. And we know a lot more about dementia today than they knew about dementia. All different types of dementia, all different types of situations. So if you look at the next selection from the Rambam, item E, it says, "Misha nitrafo dato shel aviv o shel imo, mishtadel linhog imahem kefi datam, ad sheyirucham alehem." You have to try to, when your father's mind became treif. What does it mean, became treif, nitrafa? When he's lost his mind. Your father has lost his mind. Your father has, I don't know, severe dementia, severe mental illness, maybe Alzheimer's disease. I don't know what it is. You're supposed to try to deal with them according to where the parent is at, until God will have mercy on them. What does that mean? Until they pass. What happens if you can't deal with it? It's destroying your life. You can't deal with it. Now again, today, as painful as these situations are, there are places to turn for assistance. In those days, things may have been very different. So the Rambam says, if he can't handle it because they are so sick, you can leave them. But you can't abandon them. You can leave them, but you can't abandon them. You have to find somebody else to take care of them. Now, I would like to assume that the Rambam source is actually the story in Kedushin, and I'd like to assume that the Rambam is telling us the correct interpretation as to what Ravasi did. It's not that Ravasi, he left his mother, but he didn't abandon her. And then she apparently was still a very determined woman to get to her son and get married to someone like her son. And that he couldn't handle. The Ravid, which is a little thing to the left of the Rambam, which it's very hard to see because it's tiny, so I'm going to just read you the last three lines. Omer Havram, ein zu hanire, ein zu hora nechona. This is an incorrect decision. Im hu yelech v'yaniach lo, l'mi yitzaveh l'shamro. If the son or the daughter is not going to take care, who's going to take care? Who's going to be more interested in this human being who is not capable of taking care of themselves, if not the child? A stranger is going to do it? So the answer is that we know today, yeah, that's what happens. A stranger does it. We also know that there are all sorts of different situations, and we also know that there are all sorts of different children. A lot of it is a function of not necessarily devotion. Some children are so devoted to their parents that, their parent is going to die in the house, in a bed in their house. That's what it's going to be. But of course, you also have to be able to afford that. It's not always so easy. When you're torn between providing an education for your children, keeping your spouse happy, shalom bayis in your own house, taking care of your aging parent, it's not always a simple formula. If a parent is going to be cared for in my house, then my spouse also has to be a person who's prepared to care for my parent in her house, which is also my house, but it's also her house. And then, and if the cost of taking care of my parent is I won't be able to provide for my child for their education, or I won't be able to make the wedding for whatever it may be. There are a lot of factors that come in. And is there good help? Can I bring in outside? I have to go to work. Who's going to take care when I go to work? And my wife also goes to work. Who's going to take care? Can I afford it? You know, there are many factors that come in. These are situations which challenge families and which are things which we have to learn to be able to function within the framework of a family. If you look on the previous page, this is a situation which I've also seen. Item C, feuds. One of the worst things that could ever happen in the context of family is machlokas. There's nothing worse than a family feud, and there's nothing worse than a feud that's brought into the family. This is an example of a feud that's brought into the family. It's a selection from the Shulchan Aruch. Ha'av shetziva es beno shelo yidaber ploni. A father commands his son not to talk to so-and-so. V'shelo yimcho lo ad zman katzuv. And he should not forgive him until a fixed amount of time, or for that matter, never. V'haben hayarotza lihispayes miyad luleit tzavos aviv. And the son didn't have the conflict with the person, but it doesn't necessarily be a person. It could be a member of the family. You're not allowed. If you remember the book Exodus, and you remember there were two brothers in the book of Exodus. One was called Barak ben Canaan, and his brother Akiva. And Barak was a social Zionist, and Akiva was one of the guys. He was either in the Irgun or the whatever it was. And Akiva is captured by the British, and Barak and Akiva have an ideological dispute, and they don't talk to each other for the rest of their lives. But when Akiva is in the prison in Akko, Barak ben Canaan tells his son Ari, who's very active in the Haganah, he says, "Don't let my brother die at the end of a British rope. He's supposed to be hanged." And so Ari ben Canaan leads the assault on the. It's based on a true story. The Irgun broke it. There were two prison camps in Israel where Zionists were held. One was in the Russian compound. Right, one was in the Russian compound. That's where Feinstein and Barzani blew themselves up with a grenade in the Russian compound. It's a worthwhile visit today in Jerusalem. And the other one is in Akko, in Akri, where the British, that's where most of the hangings took place, in Akko. And there was a breakout. And so the son wants to make peace. Were it not for the father's command. Ein lo lachush l'tzavaso. You don't have to listen to your father's command. Because there's something, and the commentaries explain, because you're not allowed to hate another Jew. Father hated another Jew. The father hated another Jew. It is what it is. But that's Torah says v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Now, what happens if the other Jew really harmed the father? What happened if the other person really cheated the father out of with malice and forethought, or really caused him disgrace? So it so happens, the little commentary in the bottom, I'm not going to read it with you now because of time. The Minchas Elazar, Reb Chaim Elazar Shapiro, actually says that no, there are times when you have to respect your father's request. In other words, the father's not wrong. The father's not wrong, and it's dishonoring your father, at least certainly when he's alive, and maybe even after he's alive. When someone with malice and forethought did a terrible thing. I just read, I saw in the paper that this guy was supposed to be hanged in Iran. I mean, not that I'm a big fan of the Iranian government. He was supposed to be hanged in Iran for killing some woman's son, and she actually went up onto the gallows and took the rope. As the guy was about to be hanged, she took the rope off and said she didn't want the guy who killed her son to be hanged. That's I don't know that I would be such a a saint when it comes to something like that. In any event, what I wanted to touch upon today, is just to demonstrate that both in the biblical narrative and in the halacha, there are all sorts of different circumstances which are raised in the context of family and family relationships. There's a whole chapter in Maseches Bava Basra about inheritance. Inheritance is a big issue in families. Yeah, a lot of family feuds are about money and dealing with money. Right? This is something called Yesh Nochelin. What the order of inheritances and how inheritances are supposed to be given out. And these are areas where smart parents, in my opinion, plan for the inevitable. We're all going to die. You want to avoid feud in your family? At least try your best. Give out your Yerusha in your lifetime. How can you give out the Yerusha in your lifetime? First of all, you write a will. You want to be really fair with your children? So you write a will in which you work it out that even if you have a firstborn son, you work out a system where everyone is treated, and luckily everyone's treated equally. That doesn't always work completely, but you try to consult and share with your children your thoughts and your plans, and you make sure that they all know that they're all equal. And even with the things that are hard to divide, it's hard to divide a candelabra and a Kiddush cup. But at least make the plans to make those divisions also in a fair way in which your children know about it in advance, so that your children not fight about it after 120 years, after you're no longer here. These are areas where good family planning could be very, very helpful to avoid things which, I have to tell you, I've seen it too often. A lot of family feuds are about money. There are family feuds that are about jealousy, in terms of each child. You go back to the biblical story. Some children are more successful than others. But how does a parent relate to those children? Do we admire the successful child and we make the less successful child feel like he's a less successful child? Or do we try to make every child, we try to make every child feel a certain kind of way, feel good about themselves, who they are? The interpersonal relationships between husbands and wives. It's, marriage is when people get married, they're, I assume that most people are in love. Now, we're not always in love for the right reasons. In love for the right reasons means not only, I think it's, the Vilna Gaon said, Sheker hachein vehevel hayofi, isha yirat Hashem hi titalol. Charm is false, and beauty is vain. A woman who fears God shall be praised. The Vilna Gaon says, "Come on, give me a break." He says, "That's all that it's about." He says, no. What? And I know the pasuk is written in the masculine, but it's true in the masculine and the feminine. Of course, a man is supposed to look for a beautiful woman. Of course, a woman is supposed to look for a handsome man. But what does it mean, a handsome man, and what does it mean, a beautiful woman? Someone who is beautiful in my eyes. The woman I marry should be beautiful in my eyes. The man I marry should be handsome in my eyes. And that's very important. He says, but if all you're looking for is beauty and charm, that's what's false. Of course you should be looking for beauty and charm. You should also be looking for Yiras Shamayim. You have to be looking for values also. So I would like to think that most people get married because they find the person physically attractive, and they also find the person spiritually attractive. They share common values, and that's very, very important. But when we used to read the stories, and they lived happily ever after, maybe in the stories it happens by itself. In life, it generally doesn't happen by itself. And so in the framework, there are many, many halachos. There's a wonderful Rambam in Hilchos Ishus where he talks about the mutual regard a husband and a wife have to have for each other, and the way they have to treat each other with respect and dignity and honor. The wife has to put the husband on a pedestal. The husband has to put the wife on a pedestal. And yes, there is room for people to disagree. The key to success in marriage is the ability to communicate and to resolve disputes, or to seek out others who can help you resolve disputes. These are two, they compare marriage to Kriyat Yamsuf, two people who come from different homes, different families, and suddenly meet, and they form a partnership. And there are many, many rules about how husbands and wife have to treat each other, have to speak to each other, and we have to constantly be able to work on those relationships, and they're very important for our children as well. And I guess if it reaches a point where it can't make it, thank God we're not Roman Catholics, and we're not, and divorce is a possibility, but shouldn't be so quick on the draw either. Anyway, there are a lot of issues, and as I said, I didn't know exactly what my topic was. I hope, Judy, I touched on something that was relevant to the topic, and I want to wish you. I hope people are going to come to learn, and I'm really personally honored that the Young Israel of Woodmere we have another learning program in the Young Israel of Woodmere. I can't take all the credit. I'm actually going to give the credit to Judy for being in touch with us, and for Rabbi Axelrod to being always ready to be helpful about everything good that happens here. And as Rabbi, I'll take a little credit also, but I don't really deserve any. Thank you very much.